Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, bienvenue. On behalf of the Canadian Agricultural Safety Association, I'm so pleased to welcome you to our 2025 annual conference. Thank you for joining us from across Canada, the US, Australia, and beyond, as we gather to learn, reflect, and take action on agricultural safety. In keeping with CASA's tagline, sharing knowledge, protecting people, this year's online program brings together a diverse group of speakers from Canada, the US, and Australia. Each day offers presentations designed to inform and inspire, with topics ranging from child safety and media engagement to injury reporting and community-based safety programs. And we're very excited that over 150 attendees from far and wide have registered to join us this week. Here's a brief overview of what's ahead. Today, our keynote, Katelyn Duban, Wildrose farmer, will kick things off with stories from rural women in agriculture, highlighting the human side of farm safety and the power of storytelling to build resilience. In our afternoon session, Jessie Adams from Australia will share insights from her international study tour on child farm safety and global strategies for protecting young people on farms. Tomorrow promised to be equally enriching as Jody Wakowicz will introduce AgSafe Alberta's Farmers Care Program, and Lucia Stephen will share updates on Ag Talk, a platform supporting farmers' mental health. The second session tomorrow is a panel discussion on ag injury news, filling the gap in agricultural injury reporting. Brian Weichelt, Roger Abbey, Scott Heiberger, and Sarak Gorachu will discuss how media-sourced injury can be used to inform and shape our prevention efforts. You'll want to join us again Wednesday when Craig Lester shares insights from his global Newfeld journey and 2 decades in media, exploring how agricultural stories can reach broader audiences. And Wednesday afternoon, Kristen Hoffman and Nicole Sherman will explore harvest safety in a session that highlights themes from WSPS Farm Safety Roundup podcasts. Join us as they talk about hazards and controls for the harvest season, from road safety to resilience. And to wrap things up with our final session on Thursday, Farmer Tim May will explore how social media can be used to share safety messages and inspire positive change. I believe that every one of us and every effort each one of us makes, whether to grow our own awareness as we are this week or to spread safety message through our networks, it's all important and ultimately contributes to keeping more farmers and their families safe and healthy every day. And we're so glad we're here. We encourage you to engage with the presentations, reflect on the ideas shared, and consider how they can inform your own work and your community. Before we begin, a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that our work spans many territories and treaty areas. We are grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are with us today, those who have gone before us, and the youth who inspire us. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes, and we are thankful that we are able to create, collaborate, live, and work here. We'd also like to show our appreciation to our conference sponsor, John Deere Canada. It is thanks to their sponsorship that we were able to offer free registrations for everyone this week. I'm also to let everyone know your microphones and cameras are disabled, so if you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. CASA staff will monitor these questions and share them during the Q&A period. Closed captioning is available for the conference in 20 languages. This is located by clicking the closed caption button in the control bar at the bottom of the screen. Click it to turn on captions and select the language if prompted. All presentations will be recorded and shared to all registered delegates following the conference. If you require any of the conference presentation materials translated, please contact Megan Truxell at CASA. You'll see more familiar faces ahead as CASA staff and a few of our board members MC sessions throughout the week. And now, it is my pleasure to welcome our first speaker of the conference. Katelyn Duban is a trailblazing advocate for women in agriculture, using her voice to amplify underrepresented stories and foster an inclusive community. As the founder and host of the Rural Woman podcast, she has built a global platform with nearly 1 million downloads, highlighting the challenges and triumphs of women in farming, ranching, and agribusiness. A former government employee turned first-generation grain farmer, Katelyn embraces agriculture alongside her husband on their multi-generational family farm in southern Alberta. Her journey is proof that leadership is built through adaptability, resilience, and stepping into the unknown. A sought-after speaker, Katelyn inspires women to own their stories, redefine success, and lead with authenticity. Whether behind the mic, in the field, or on stage, she's reshaping the conversation about women in agriculture, one story at a time. Katelyn, we are so pleased to welcome you today. And now I'll turn the floor over to you.
Sandy, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. And CASA, thank you so much for inviting me to kick off your annual online conference. I've had the pleasure and privilege of meeting a few of the wonderful people that work for your organization, and I cannot thank you enough as a farmer for what you do for our industry. Now, friends, I am so excited to share with you my presentation, which reminds me I should pull up the screen for the presentation. We're going to talk about a lot of things today. First and foremost, again, thank you so much for letting me be here with you today to kick off this amazing conference. The outline for the next 3 days for you. We're going to learn so many things. Let's see. Okay, looks good. I got the okay from the chat, so we're good to go. So first and foremost, who am I? My name is Katelyn Duban, and I am a farmer, I'm a podcaster, and I'm an entrepreneur. But really, when it comes down to it, through all of my technical job titles, I'm a storyteller. Growing up, when we were told that we were storytellers, technically, I think that meant you were a fibber, but I take the title of storyteller very seriously. So I want to start off with more of my story in agriculture for you to get to know me a little bit better. So this is my family. These three handsome fellas. My husband, Justin, is a multi-generational grain farmer who is the third generation to grow on our farm. His grandparents immigrated from Ukraine, one before the war and one during the war. His baba, Annie, who is 98 years old today, is the epitome of a rural woman and is my inspiration for everything I do on our farm. This past weekend, while visiting her, she asked me when I was going to get a milk cow. And behind Justin in this photo, you can see that was actually Baba's milking can that she used every morning to milk her cows before her children got up. And of course, I would be remiss not to introduce to you my fur children, Kevin, who is right beside me in the middle. Kevin is my first ever real farm dog. He's 3 years old, Bernese Mountain Dog, and is the chillest teddy bear that you could ever meet. And Carl, his younger brother, is the stereotypical second child who is an absolute menace to society. As Sandy mentioned, I am a first generation farmer. I did not grow up on a farm. I did not know where my food came from. And for an embarrassingly long time, I couldn't tell the difference between a hay bale and a straw bale. I grew up a stereotypical millennial in a household with divorced parents, a half brother, and I went to college afterwards and found myself a career in post-secondary education. I met Justin back in 2012 and we married at the end of 2016, and I moved to the farm. And while I moved to a farm, it was never my intention to be an active member of the farm. However, during my lunch breaks at my job, I share this story and it's kind of embarrassing now. I used to actually Google, what do women on farms do? Because I was not connected to agriculture in any way. Fast forward to spring of 2017, in our first year of marriage, my first spring on the farm, I accomplished what at the time seemed to be the most terrifying feat that I could have ever imagined. I mowed the lawn. That day, it took me over 8 hours, but I got it done. And I figured if I could drive this Massey Ferguson ZT29 tractor, then I could probably basically do anything. And I became more curious of what was happening around the farm. And that curiosity led me to learning about agriculture and really embracing the seasons that we worked in. And later that spring and summer, in August, I was asked by my husband if I wanted to come out on the swather with him on a Sunday. And the heathens that we are, we headed out to the field. And I thought myself, oh, this is going to be so romantic. We are going to spend the afternoon together. I'll pack a picnic, we'll ride around, and it'll just be, a Hallmark afternoon. Well, after a while, he asked if I wanted to drive. And I thought, sure, that would be fun and exciting. So once I got the hang of it and the back tires turning before the front tires, uh, and I figured out the GPS, when you press the button, you go in a straight line. Um, he told me to pull over. And so I did. I pulled over and I was getting out to follow him as he would get out to check things and I would get out to stand there. And I didn't know what I was looking for, but I would go and stand there. Anyways, he says, no, you're going to stay here. And I said, what? And he says, you got the hang of this. You're good. And I thought, what the hell is happening? And at that time, he left me. He was like, you're good. You've got this. And he imparted the piece of wisdom to me that I have remembered ever since that day. He says, just don't hit anything. So away I went. And this was my first day swathing a field. Obviously, we had to take a picture. It was a picture finish. This day was significant for a couple of reasons for me in my farming career. First, it was the day that I knew I was going to quit my city job and quit all of the certainty that I had in life, and I was going to learn to be a farmer. The second thing that I learned that day was to never wear short shorts again in a tall field because it was itchy and very unsafe, if we're being honest, in our safety presentations. So since that day, I have honed my skills as a farmer, learning what I need to do in each season and plant and tend and grow our grain crops to have a successful year. During that time, I spent a lot of time in tractor cabs listening to podcasts because I loved that form of media. And it felt like there was somebody keeping me company in that buddy seat. And when I looked for a podcast that interested me in the agriculture space, there weren't any, respectfully. Meanwhile, I was online learning from incredible women through Facebook and Instagram and Twitter daily that were doing amazing things on their respective operations. And no two women were the same, but we all had that connection. So I wanted to learn through these stories. And I thought, if there wasn't a podcast that were sharing these stories, as a stereotypical millennial, what do? We Google, how do you start a podcast? And that's what I did. So back in 2018 is when the thought came to me. And when I found that these women's stories weren't being shared, they were not being celebrated either in a light of we are doing incredible things. So it has been my honor and privilege for almost the last 7 years and nearly 250 interviews with incredible women with 1 million downloads worldwide. The Rural Woman podcast has amplified and celebrated the voices of women in agriculture that I never imagined. And looking back, it all started with a story. Stories that these women themselves found ordinary, but myself and a worldwide audience agrees that their ordinary is truly extraordinary. Because stories build trust. Stories create community. And stories have the potential to save lives. I believe that one of the very best things about agriculture isn't crops or livestock. It's the people. Culture in agriculture comes from the people. We are resourceful and resilient and deeply connected to the land and community. We're the ones who will show up with a casserole when disaster strikes, who will lend a hand at harvest when a neighbor falls ill, who will share advice freely because they would rather see you succeed as their neighbor than struggle alone. It's also the diversity of people in agriculture that makes it so special. From multi-generational families passing down traditions to the first generation farmers carving out a place for themselves, and to the women and young people who are reshaping what leadership looks like in this space. The variety of experiences enriches our whole industry. And maybe most importantly, the stories of these people remind us that agriculture is human. Behind every field and every fence and every animal is a person with a dream, with challenges, and with a reason why they keep working. That's what makes agriculture more than just an industry. It makes us a community. And when I first stepped into agriculture myself, I thought safety meant machinery manuals and warning labels. And every single man telling every single woman to make sure you tie your hair back, which is very important. But over the years, I've learned that safety goes far beyond that. It's about people. It's about our families and our communities and making sure that we all come home safe at the end of the day. And I'll be honest, the learning curve has been steep. There were days of long hours, isolation, and exhaustion. There are seasons that I spend more time in that tractor and in the cab of a combine than I do anywhere else. And it can feel like the only connection I have with the outside world relies on our crappy rural cell phone connection and internet connection that is barely here. The days we fight against elements that are essentially outside of our control. These aren't just hard days, they're risks. Because when we're tired and stretched thin, that's when mistakes can happen. And often it's women on farms who notice these risks and balance the farm work with their family and seeing how safety can impact everyone. And it's from hearing from other women in agriculture who have lived these risks. Their stories have opened my eyes even wider to what safety really means on a farm. These are just a few of the faces of the incredible women that I've had the privilege of sharing their stories with on the Rural Woman podcast. Every episode is a reminder that agriculture isn't just about land and livestock. It's about people and the stories that connect us. One of the most powerful things I've witnessed through the podcast is how women's voices are reshaping the conversation around safety. When women share their stories, whether it's about a near miss on equipment or the weight of being overworked or the toll of mental health, they are opening the door to this cultural change. Those stories matter because they normalize talking about risks in a way that manuals and checklists never can. I just want to share a few examples of stories of women who have been vulnerable and shared their stories with me. I want to kick it off with take episode 220 with CASA's own Robin Anderson. Robin spoke about protecting farm families through safety education, which CASA provides to farmers 365 and are passionate. That's what they do. But she also shared the personal experience behind it, what it meant to her to grow up in agriculture, to see the safety risks around her, and how she could take her own personal experiences and share with everyone to make us all safer. The personal experiences behind her work make safety real and relatable and memorable. I'm just looking at these faces here. We're talking about our physical safety. When we're talking about our physical safety, it can be our physical health. One of my dear friends that I've met through the podcast, Annabelle Morgan, she's a rancher down in Montana. She noticed her husband sounded a little bit more scratchy at the end of one season than he normally did, encouraged him to go seek help into the doctor. It turns out he had stage 3 throat cancer. She noticed that on top of everything else that they were going through. And Zaid, her husband, is still with us today and has been in remission. Um, we talk about safety when we talk about machinery. And again, all of those are super important. I almost feel guilty telling you that I listen to podcasts or listened to podcasts when I was running equipment. I know now that I need to be listening to the equipment more than I need to be listening to these stories. But that's what AirPods are for. And you can have one in one ear and listening to the machine in the other. But sharing these stories and the power of women's voices, when one of us speaks, it gives others permission to share too. And when those stories come forward, they ripple outward and shaping how families talk about safety and how communities respond to risk and how future generations can approach farm life. I've been trusted with some of the most vulnerable stories, moments of grief, resilience, and hope. Each one reinforces the truth that safety isn't just a policy, and it's a culture that we build together. And again, it goes back to us going to story. And what so many of these stories reveal is that the greatest risks on the farm aren't always the ones that we can see. So I wasn't supposed to go. I want to share a story with you. And I thought of it this morning when I was thinking about what are hidden risks on the farm. And it's a story that happened just this past harvest. This year will be my 9th harvest, and it will also be the 3rd year that I have the highest number of hours clocked on a combine. um, Combining has been one of the coolest experiences that I have got to learn on this farm. Having my nephews who live in the city come out and see auntie and uncle on the farm is always exciting. But to see those little boys think it's so cool that auntie basically gets to drive a transformer through the field has been a really lovely experience for me. During this harvest, I was combining the wheat field in our south field. And I was clipping along at the breakneck speed of 2 miles per hour, which is pretty fast around here for some of the crops that we grow. And I was picking up swaths, but that day was particularly beautiful. The sky was so blue, a few clouds in the sky, and we had a slight breeze from the south, not our typical 100-mile-per-hour wind that we get here in southern Alberta. But the thing that I was loving the most out of that entire day was the amount of hawks that were in our field. And hawks are not abnormal around here. We have a lot of them. But at one point, I could count between 9 and 15 hawks in the field at one time, coming along with us while we worked through the field. They were all lined up on the pivot, and they would all take turns swooping in to pick up a mouse. One of them even caught a snake. I was glad I wasn't out in the field in that area when they found the snake. But in the south field, besides swooping hawks, I know that there are other hazards that I have to be aware of. One of them being the pivot. And there are hand move pipes in the tall grass along the south end near the road. We also have a bindweed patch in our field, and we are a certified organic operation. So the way that we deal with weeds is different than conventional farm would deal with them sometimes. One of the ways that we deal with a bind patch weed is we take silage tarp and we put tires around that patch of weeds. So I know that when I'm near that, I have to be aware of that. Little did I know that when the field was getting swathed, somebody picked up a tire and put it in the swath. And as I was going along, I could see the obvious hazard of the tarp and tires in the field, but hidden beneath that swath, as I got closer, I thought, oh, that's a big weed patch. I got a little closer. I was like, that looks a little bit more black and rubbery. And finally, luckily, I stopped and I noticed the tire before it went through the combine, because the outcome could have been a lot different that day if I didn't notice that tire. And when I'm thinking of that tire as a metaphor, I'm thinking of what are those hidden risks that we deal with every single day on a farm that are hidden. We know about machinery, we know about the bindweed patch, but what are other things that could take us out as a farmer in our busiest season? And one of the biggest hidden risks that I think is a detriment to our industry is farmers' mental health and their mental well-being. Now, this study was conducted a few years ago now from the University of Guelph, and 40% of producers across Canada reported that they would feel uneasy seeking professional help due to what people might think. Now, we don't often talk about the risks you can't see, like stress and burnout and isolation, but these are all as real as a broken PTO shaft. When you're mentally exhausted, you are more likely to miss something small that could have been a big consequence, like that tire in the swath. Agriculture has some of the highest mental health struggles of any industry, and that's a safety issue that we cannot ignore. And as a producer myself, I have experienced the isolation, the mental burnout, the depression, the anxiety, all of these things that can come with being a farmer, being a human. But why is it? And when I think about why is it that 40% of producers would feel like they can't ask for this help? Or if they do, what help is available for them? And now I myself have sought out professional help before agriculture, during agriculture. So before agriculture, when I would go to a therapist and I would complain about my job or my mother, they would have, kind of the cookie cutter answers of what I could do. Now, as a farmer, working in seasons and being out in the field up to 18 hours a day, some of those cookie cutter things don't work. That could be a barrier. Um, Distance to town, barrier. The time it takes. It might just be an hour, but if it takes you an hour to get to town and an hour back, that's half of a day almost for you that you're missing out on. There are other options now. There's online, there's telehealth, all of these things, but the infrastructure of being rural, I live in one of the greatest countries in the world, and I have the crappiest cell phone reception and internet connection. We're holding on by a string here. The infrastructure is not there for us. Luckily, those barriers are starting to be broken. There are people in the mental health space that want to help farmers, and exclusively farmers. You're going to hear from some of them during the next couple days. Some other ones, just quickly to mention, the National Farmers Mental Health Alliance, the Do More Agriculture Foundation, and the Porchlight Society are just the ones off of the top of my head. The truth is that these resources are super critical and we need them, and we need more of them, and we need more people to talk about them. But what often makes the biggest difference is simply knowing that we, as farmers and as humans, we are not alone. And that's where I think one of the most important tools comes in. Storytelling is one of the most powerful safety tools we have. We may forget statistics, but we remember stories. I can tell you right now, I do not remember the rest of the stats from that story from or the research done by the University of Guelph. I cannot remember safety reports that I read 5 years ago. But I do remember the time of the mother who shared the story of her child nearly drowning in a stock tank and how that single experience changed the way that her family approached supervision. I can tell you about the time of the woman who lost not only her father-in-law, but her brother-in-law to their mental health struggles. And the next day, they had to go milk the cows. These stories are what we remember. And the power of storytelling, it makes the invisible visible. It takes something that might feel abstract or distant, make it feel real and tangible and relatable and unforgettable. But beyond memory, storytelling has another role. It breaks stigmas. In agriculture, we've been taught to push through, to be tough, to keep our struggles quiet. That silence can just be as dangerous as any piece of machinery. When someone is willing to share not just their successes, but their close calls, their burnout, their fears, they give permission to others to do the same. Vulnerability becomes prevention. When one person admits, I was exhausted and I made a mistake, it does not make them weak. It makes them a teacher. It opens up the door for cultural change. Where talking about risks and mental health and safety doesn't seem like it's complaining, but it is protecting the very people and the families that agriculture depends on. Sharing mistakes doesn't just help others avoid them, it chips away the stigma that we have carried alone for so long. And when the stigma breaks, I really think that's when safety begins. Now, I am not a safety expert, but I'm an expert in stories. And in my practical steps forward, I believe that stories are powerful, but they can't just stay stories. The real impact is when we take what we've learned and heard and put it into action. And I think of the conversations that I've had with women where they've shared these stories of near misses or vulnerabilities with their mental health and postpartum depression and just a variety of things that women deal with on the farm. I've taken bits and pieces from each of their stories and have related it back to my own story and thought about how can we make our farm safer, not only physically, but mentally. Um, and so the question is how do we move forward and put these steps into action? And we're building a culture of care and safety on our farms. So I really think normalizing these conversations is first and foremost the most important part, because too often safety only gets discussed after something goes wrong. And to change that, we need to normalize conversations about risk before accidents happen. That might look like starting with a morning check-in before you head to the field, or taking a moment during your field supper to ask, what felt unsafe today? How are you guys feeling? You know, there was a story that was shared by Allison Weaver. She is a farmer near Lloydminster, and she is one of the greatest storytellers. And she shared a story with me that one day they were in the field having a meal, and she noticed one of their younger guys was falling asleep during dinner. And out of everybody that was in that field, Allison was the only one to notice that. And after dinner was done, she went to her husband and kind of gave him a little nudge and said, hey, so and so is looking a little bit tired. Maybe send him home first. Um, Having these conversations and normalizing and making space for people to speak up um, without fear or it being brushed off is the greatest gift that you can give yourself, your family, and your staff on your farm. Um, because when safety is a normal conversation, um, and it's regular and judgment free, that's when it starts being part of everyday problem solving. You know, this also ties into our mental health. Checking in over coffee, saying, "How are you doing? What's your yields look like?" You never know how much that conversation is going to impact somebody's day. And talk about the help that you've received, whether that's through professional, whether that's through talking to somebody from your community, from your church. Um, Normalizing conversations about our overall health and safety and wellness changes the culture of agriculture. And now, when we're talking about making these relationships in the community and culture, we often forget that mentorship is one of the most underutilized safety tools that we have in agriculture. It's the most underutilized tool that we have in agriculture. We learn so much by watching others and how they handle livestock, how they manage stress while managing that livestock, and how they can pace themselves through that long season. It also invites people to learn from you from different generations. It invites people into agriculture. That is the one resource that agriculture will eventually run out of is people. So we need these people and we need to invite them in. Um, when experienced farmers are willing not only to share their successes, but their mistakes, that gives the next generation a chance to avoid repeating them. And mentorship can be formal through programs and organizations or informal, like a neighbor checking in or a woman in ag calling up a younger farmer to say, "Hey, I'm here to help you. What can you do?" As a first generation young woman farmer myself, the first day, the first time that my neighbor brought over a meal for our crew because she could see how hard I was working out in the field, I cried like a baby. It was one simple act. And that piece has taught me that when the next generation move in down the road, that's something that I can do to help them. Um, those simple exchanges pass down knowledge and truly change the culture that we have and continue to grow the healthy culture that we have and expand the things that we're lacking. Safety can just be a poster in a shop, or it can be those little stick figures on the side of our tractors, or it can be a culture shift. It has to be woven into our everyday fabric on the farm. And that means leaders modeling safe behavior, kids being included in conversations about risk, and families agreeing that coming home safe matters more than pushing through on another hour of work. And this culture shifts happen when everyone sees safety as not only as rules, but care. It's not about slowing down productivity. It's about ensuring that we have people who we love beside us tomorrow, the next season, and generations to come. Now, my second last slide here is a quote that has meant so much to me over the last number of years. And that is, owning our story and loving ourselves through that process is the bravest thing we will ever do. And I encourage you, if you are an active part of agriculture, in production agriculture, livestock, um, working in commodities, that you share your stories and to know that what seems ordinary to you could be extraordinary to somebody else. And these stories really shape the way that we will continue to share the culture of agriculture with others. And it can feel isolating and it can feel lonely, but it doesn't have to be. When we share our vulnerabilities, when we give ourselves, when we give pieces of ourselves to other people, it is brave. And when I think about how scared I was to drive that lawnmower, to drive that swather, to drive that combine, I was scared. But I trusted that the people around me wanted me to be safe and we would figure it out. And I have. And when I think about my story has been twisty and turning, and it has had high highs and low lows. But sharing this vulnerability and this peace with you has truly been a gift for me today. And I truly hope that you share your own story in agriculture and with people in agriculture, and we can continue to make this one of the greatest industries that we have. So thank you so much again to CASA and all of the wonderful people who have put on this conference. I cannot wait to see the rest of the speakers over the next few days. I'm happy to take any questions that you have. Thank you again so much.
Thank you, Katelyn. That was wonderful. Really appreciate you being here today. I'm not seeing any open questions in the chat, so it looks like you might get off easy this morning.
Heard.
Or afternoon, depending on where people are. So I just want to thank you so much for your presentation today and for all that you're doing to hear and share women's stories, their perspectives, their challenges, and their strengths, and really celebrating those strengths and all the way those stories serve agriculture and the culture of safety and care on the farm. I agree so wholeheartedly that every story can make a difference and every story can be a lesson. So thank you for that. Oh, look at that. There's a question.
I
So
knew
what's
if we
your
put some pressure on them, they would ask a question.
exactly worked perfectly. What's your best advice for a new woman in ag starting on a family farm?
Oh, I have so many pieces of advice. How much time do we have? My best piece of advice would be to come in it with curiosity. So I've talked to many women who have struggled with this transition, and myself included. So my personal story, I didn't come from a farming background. I didn't know the rules of the roost on a farm. Um, I was used to working Monday to Friday, having weekends off, going on summer holidays, all of these things. That's how I was grew up, and that was the culture that I was raised in. Moving to a farm that was literally 20 minutes from my childhood front door and feeling like I had gone into a different planet was a big struggle for me. But I think the part that helped me the most was being curious and asking questions and not being afraid to sound ridiculous. The amount of questions that my poor husband had to answer for me was, I look back now and I just laugh. But when the tables are flipped and I'm asked these questions by my city people that don't know, I look at it like, wow, what an opportunity to share something to expand what we do out here. Because, like I said, I only grew up 20 minutes away from where I live now, and I had no idea what was happening out here. So that curiosity piece, I think, is super important. And for the women who are entering into a farm that maybe are coming from a different farm, I feel like that is a whole other set of issues that you could face, right? We grew up and we farmed this way and we raised livestock this way. And now I am integrating into a different farm that maybe does things completely different. Um, it can be challenging because if you're anything like me, you really like to be right. So if you think what you're doing was the right way and you're going somewhere else and they're doing it the wrong way, it can be really challenging. Um, but something that I've personally learned in the right and wrong way of agriculture, this really loose terms of right and wrong. There are so many different ways that we can be growing food, fuel, and resources for people, right? There's so many different ways. we don't do things exactly the same way that our neighbors do. I share stories from women who don't do things the way that we do it. I don't think what they did was wrong. I just think it was different. And I think that curiosity piece can blend in so well into integrating into an established operation. And truly, that operation is receiving a gift of an open mindset of somebody who can bring new and innovative ideas into that generational farm. I've seen women save the family farm with them being the in-law that comes in. Um, it's been incredible to hear the different stories. So my best piece of advice is to be curious.
Okay, here's another. Do you feel like you fit into this industry without bias from other farmers? No pressure.
Um, I think I do in some ways, and I don't in other ways. Um, and I think that can be said in any industry, right? When you have somebody that can come in with that open mindset and curiosity, uh, people who have been doing it the same way because that's what their dad did and their grandpa did and their great grandpa did sometimes might not be open to that change and the way of seeing things differently. And when I started the Rural Woman podcast back in 2019, I have, and since then, unapologetically only interview women in agriculture. And 99% of people are A-OK with that. And then there's that 1% that are like, well, why won't you interview John Smith? He has things to say about agriculture too, right? So there's different ways of doing things. And coming in and having different ways to learn from different voices, I think is never a bad thing. I, again, might not always agree with what my guest is sharing, but I will provide that space for them to share that because that piece might connect with somebody else and put all of these things together. So I think being kind of an outspoken woman in agriculture is not new. There have been many women who have come before me, and there are many women who have come since. And I'm happy to walk alongside them. And I'm happy that as an industry, we can all work together to build a stronger culture and to continue to keep doing what we do because our jobs are kind of cool, right? Like we get to drive transformers, according to my nephews. So
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree complete with agriculture is such a network and so much stronger if we all work together.
yeah,
So, and just
absolutely.
echoing what you said about curiosity, I think a lot about curiosity and care and commitment. And you touched on all of those things, whatever our path is in life, if you're curious about it, you care enough, and then you commit to making that difference. I think we can all accomplish a lot
Yeah.
together. So, um, okay, here's another. What resources are in short supply or missing in the ag industry to properly address farm safety issues and mental health challenges in particular?
I would say probably one of the things that really is a barrier is communicating, getting the information out there. Um, unless you are able to commit to opening all of your emails, going to all of your community forums, regularly checking in with your seed salesman or whoever it is of different resources out there for you, it can be really hard. You know, I'm lucky enough that part of my job is sitting in front of the computer on the internet. That's also part of a bad part of my job. But being able to find these resources and to know that they're out there, that can be a full-time job. So I think the barrier that we're finding is that more and more of these organizations and companies have the information that we need. It's just how do we communicate that to farmers when we're not sitting in front of a desk or in front of a TV 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, right? We're out in the fields, we're out in rural places that we don't have the connection that a lot of, normal people do, right? So I think that is a barrier that I don't know how we fix that. Um, I think part of how we fix that is taking responsibility ourselves as farmers. Not that we needed any more responsibility, but seeking out that information. And
Mhm.
once you have that information, share it with your neighbor, share it with a family member, tell them that this is here. I've even heard of farms having like, you have your safety manual, but you also have your resource manual and have that available for everybody on your farm, not just the farm owners, the people that are working for you as well. They're also the people that are out there helping support your dream of your farm. They should also have access to these resources as well because they are, it might not be their pocketbook that some of these expenses are coming out of, but they're still taking that time and that dedication to the farm to also have these resources available to them. So I think for me, as a farmer, that's what I see the biggest barrier as is, but also it's my responsibility to share those things. So as a public figure in agriculture, I share the resources that I find. I say, hey, this is really cool. I never knew that they provided this. So share them.
That sounds great. And you got people warmed up now. You've got questions coming in quickly. So you have a few more. One is, how do you choose your guests and what stories are you most passionate about sharing?
Sure. So in the beginning, how I chose my guests, I had a group of girlfriends on Instagram that when I started this, I was like, hey, I'm going to start a podcast. Do you want to do an interview with me? They were like, sure. And there was a dozen of them. So I recorded those and released them. And I thought, nobody's going to listen to this. I'm a terrible audio editor who Googled this. Like, nobody's going to listen. And then once those interviews started coming out, it was like, oh, you should interview so and so. You should talk to this person. Have you heard of this person? And slowly it became word of mouth. And truly, that's how my podcast grew back in 2019, was word of mouth. I was a one-woman show for a really long time. But I get to participate now as a public speaker and I get to travel all over the place and meet incredible women in person. I also do a lot of, reading of the Agri Success magazine or whatever that's coming through. So that's how I find a lot of my guests is again being curious and seeking them out, but also other people putting incredible women's names forward. My favorite is when a husband puts their wife's name forward. Those nomination forms really tug at my romantic heartstrings. So, any men out there listening that have some amazing women you want me to interview. Um, but the stories that I think I'm the most passionate of sharing, truly, it's that would be like picking your favorite child. I can't. Um, all of these stories are so unique in their own way. Um, I've interviewed 7-year-olds who have grown up on the family farm and this is all they've ever known to a 93-year-old that is the same. And their love of this lifestyle is truly apparent. I will say my favorite interviews to conduct are when we log on. Most of my interviews are done via Zoom or online. The women who are terrified to be talking to me. And I can tell by their body language because they're sitting here like this. They don't know what to expect. They're nervous. And so it's my job then to loosen them up. And especially when they say, well, I don't have anything interesting to talk about, hold my beer, we'll get it out. Because when we're talking and these women are telling me about themselves and this is kind of my bio, but when we get into what they're passionate about, what really lights their fire, that's when I see the shoulders drop, and that's when I see pieces of them come out into their stories, and it's something that they get to look back on, and I hope that they're proud to hear themselves in those stories and to know that these pieces of their stories are really inspiring others.
That sounds great. There's just a few more. This one, I'll read you the preamble. I'm coming from the healthcare safety domain. A key to ensure people have safe care journeys is speaking up and being partners in care alongside doctors and other care professionals. There's a perception that farmers struggle to advocate for their health. Do you think that's true? And if yes, how can we help them be more engaged?
I think they do. And I think a lot of that comes back to the piece of, stigmatism and pride. I look at the farm families that I am a part of, and I look at the way that things have always been done. Farmers have a really hard time asking for help. They are salt of the earth people. They do what they need to do to get it done, and then they figure out the rest later. But I think too often we've seen not enough farmer retirement parties, because a farmer retirement party is typically their funeral. And that's sad. For me, as a person, to see somebody essentially work themselves to the grave, I don't think that's something to be proud of. And that can be something that somebody might want to fight me on, and that's okay. I don't think that's how we should be. But I think having conversations and encouraging people to share their stories about what's happening, professionally, personally, mentally, all of these things, that's what helps break that stigma. So if you have somebody who is willing to share their story with you, listen to them. Take what they've told you and learn from it so you can help the next person. Like I said, agriculture, it's funny because farmers don't want to feel special, or they don't want to be made to feel special, but our industry is just different in some ways than it is in others. So you have to break through that stubbornness. And I can tell you, it's real hard. We are really stubborn people.
Okay, and I think one last question to close. I think you'll like this one. You mentioned daily safety check-in meetings, which are great. What are some strengths that women can bring to those meetings that men might not, who are less outgoing?
I think everyone loves a good icebreaker. Bring a joke if you want. I think honestly, women are better at picking up cues and signals than some of our male counterparts are. That's not to say that we don't have empathetic males working in our industry, but I think women can bring that piece. And again, bring that curiosity piece. Ask questions. If you ask somebody why 5 times, you can get a whole lot out of them, out of something that is so simple of, why do you think that PTO shaft is making that noise? Or did you notice this, right? We can pick up on things. And I think that is an absolute strength for women. And, women's voices in this industry have not always been amplified. Sometimes they haven't even been respected. But I think showing up as a leader can be as simple as going to a safety meeting, or even implementing a safety meeting and saying how important it is. Those small pieces on your own operation, that builds leadership across our industry.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that. And thank you again, Katelyn. That's the end of the questions, so you're off the hook. Thank you again for kicking things off for a great CASA conference week ahead. So to everyone else, I'd like to remind you that we'll have a 1-hour break. The afternoon program will begin at 1 p.m. Central, which is noon here in Ontario. The Zoom link you were provided will be the same link for the afternoon session, when we'll hear from Jesse Adams on protecting young people on the farm. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you back here at 1 p.m. Central.